It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
To infinity and beyond!
Get off, Napoleon. Make yourself a dang quesadilla.
I know Kung Fu.
This is one doodle that can't be undid, Holmes Gillett.
And my axe.
This should be open because it's civil rights. This is the 90s.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
1.21 gigawatts!
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
Gucci.
Hello and welcome to the KendallCast Movie Roundtable. I'm your host Kendall. With me as always is Ian.
Hey guys.
Jeff.
How's it going?
And Nick.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So today we are talking about Godzilla -1. The second movie in this Godzilla series that I forget, is it Toho that does it? I want to say. After Shin Godzilla, and my second favorite movie of 2023. Yeah, it's like great. So, and also I will say, like, this is one of those where if you haven't seen it, go watch it, because it's a spoilerable movie. So I had heard that this movie was good from a number of reliable sources. It's picking me up on everybody's mic. I hope that's not a problem. Whatever. I'm sure it's fine. I got to see it in theaters and really loved it. I was really happy that it became available more quickly than the previous Godzilla movie did in America, like on like streaming and stuff. And I mean, as far back as when we did that movie with Andrew Garfield in it that I didn't like, I've been wanting like a World War II from the point of view of Japanese guy movie. And this is like exactly that. And they didn't have to. I mean, obviously it's a Japanese film, so whatever. But they did not feel the need to westernize it in any way. That was my problem with Shogun on FX this year. Was it's like this really really compelling, interesting story, and then you throw a white guy in there, and it's just like, just tell me the story from that perspective. And it was, and then it's like it's a Godzilla movie too, and it's like legitimately excellent as a Godzilla movie, but it didn't have to be a Godzilla movie, and there's lots of stuff. So I want to hear from Nick, because Nick, this is again I chose this movie because it's the only way that I could know for sure that you would watch it.
I mean, that's fair. You knew exactly what you were doing when you picked the World War II movie, and I was really impressed with historical accuracy. We'll get into that in a little bit, but honestly, it's a pretty good movie. It was fun. I mean, I think I really liked a lot of the societal overtones and stuff, like the kamikaze, being a kamikaze pilot who got sent home was huge shame, basically. Like a lot of the civilian population basically blamed them for everything that happened, because during the propaganda period, they were really talked up as like going to be the saviors of Japan, and the fact that he came home and didn't do his job basically meant that everyone viewed him as directly killing everyone who failed, and we see that in the movie, and I thought that was a really nice touch.
And I thought with that, what I really liked about that is that we saw that people did blame him at first, and certain people blamed him, but also not everyone and not forever, but he still kind of had to live with it himself.
Yeah, it's as much about his own guilt than other people. It's
his personal demons like haunt him throughout the film. He continues to have nightmares throughout the film, and these are tied to his experience with Godzilla, making Godzilla also like a manifestation of his nightmares, of his failure on Odo Island at the beginning of the film. Like, so his ultimate triumph over it is also kind of like his ultimate triumph over his personal demons.
Yeah, they even refer to it as like his war, right? One of the last lines of the movie, he walks in to see what the girlfriend's name.
Orko.
Yeah, and she's like, "Is your war over now?" Right? Like
skipping to the end, but yes.
Yeah. Spoilers.
So yeah, I think they did a really great job, and aside from one glaring thing which I think is necessary for the plot, and we'll talk about that again later. I think it was really historically accurate, and they did a really great job.
Okay, Jeff, initial impressions.
Yeah, so I am not a particularly big Godzilla fan in general, right? Like, the only Godzilla movies I've seen was the really bad one with Matthew Broderick back in the day, right, where Godzilla looks terrible. And then I saw the one with, like, Bryan Cranston. I don't remember the name of it. That one's a little bit more recent. And I thought it was...
It's called Godzilla.
Just Godzilla, okay.
Those are also the only two Godzilla movies I
I thought, like,
all the way through.
The first one I saw was bad. The second one that I saw was fine. It was okay. Like, but I still thought I thought Bryan Cranston's character was the most interesting, but he wasn't in it for very long, you know. But for this movie... So I've always thought of Godzilla as a movie is more like a disaster movie. You know, like Day After Tomorrow or just something like that, because Godzilla is just like this unstoppable force that kills people and everyone runs away, and that's kind of it. And all the human components of Godzilla movies just don't work for me until now, right? I really, really enjoyed this movie because it was just about the humans involved, right? It was about their stories. They're humanized incredibly well. And I actually think the movie's also about like Japanese society as a whole, on top of, like, it's another layer deep from just Yoichi's personal story. And I think Godzilla essentially works as a metaphor for a couple of things. And I think when Godzilla functions as a metaphor with some cool laser nuclear breath, I'm for it, right? So I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was fantastic, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, so I kind of fell for this, too. It's really kind of sad that, like, we have all these Godzilla movies, like Godzilla versus Kong, and all these, like, kind of generic kaiju, like, big things smash into each other movies that kind of, like, have led us as Americans to believe that that's what Godzilla is. But so I was also surprised. This was also a movie that I saw in the theaters, but I was just, like, looking for something to do. I'm like, let's see what's playing in the theaters. Why is it there's a Godzilla movie that I haven't heard of that has really good reviews? I've heard a couple of good things about. Let's just go try it, and maybe it's just a kaiju movie. Like, you know, I didn't know anything about it, and then I went and I was just blown away.
Because Americans thinking that Godzilla movies are just a bunch of giant monsters destroying stuff is not necessarily wrong. There are many Godzilla movies that are like that. Yes, yeah. So I've seen which ones we've seen. So I've seen the Godzilla 2000 and the Cranston one. I've seen Shin Godzilla, which was the first one of this whatever studio or whatever, whoever owns the Japanese versions. They're putting this series, and then I think I watched the original Godzilla, but I don't have any memory of it. So I either was drunk or I fell asleep or the sound didn't work.
One of those.
Because I know that like when HBO Max first came out, the sound didn't work, and I tried to watch Godzilla unsuccessfully. But I don't remember. Yeah, I don't actually. I probably didn't finish it.
There was some summer where my brother and I like watched some of the old ones, like the old Godzilla with the guy in a suit and all this stuff, and, you know, he's fighting Mothra and stuff. So, like, I had some background. I definitely had seen 2000. I saw a couple of the other ones. 2000 is the one with that excellent line at the end where he's like, maybe there's a little bit of Godzilla in all of us or something like that. yeah, classic stuff. But yeah, this one has definitely been my favorite.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I will say Shin Godzilla is also worth watching. It's a little more it's like a little bit, there's like a little bit of a comedic overtone to it because it's a very and it hits very different post-COVID because it's very there's a commentary on bureaucracy, you know, and it is very much like a situation where if they dealt with it at the beginning of the movie, then they wouldn't have had the problems at the end of the movie, kind of thing. Also, the version of Shin Godzilla that I watched, and I tell this to a lot of people a lot, I accidentally bought the dubbed version, and it was dubbed by like anime voice actors. So it's this live action. It was really fascinating because it's this live action. First of all, yeah, like these voices that it wasn't any actors that I knew, but it was like voices that I'd heard before, like in Ghost in the Shell or something like that.
Sure.
And it also was like there'd be like an old guy talking, and he's doing like an anime old guy voice, and I'm like, oh, that's what that guy's supposed to look like. Like, because because like anime style, like, first of all, everybody looks like they're white in anime, so it's like, oh, that's what that's an old Japanese guy is supposed to look like, So it was a very like I don't know, it was an interesting experience, but yeah, very different film, yeah, I freaking love this film. Yeah, like what else? Nick, talk about some stuff.
All right, so I mean, I'm not going to dive into the easy questions, which is the historical stuff, which I know you want me to talk about. Instead, I'm going to talk about what did you guys think of Godzilla as more of a force of nature in this one? Because I know that the monster movies recently, we've had a lot of like King Kong. Oh, we have to empathize with King Kong. We have to know King Kong's backstory. We have to feel bad about King Kong's family getting killed by giant snake-headed monsters. And in this one, he is just doing his thing, and no one knows why he's doing it, but he is definitely just... He wasn't, like, necessarily going to murder everyone on Odo, but he was definitely thinking about it.
It almost kind of reminded me of Final Fantasy X, if anyone's played that game. Ian, I'm pretty sure you have, right?
Yes.
So in Final Fantasy X, there's a big monster named Sin, right, that travels in the water and just, like, wantonly destroys villages. And the entire point of the game is you're, like, on a pilgrimage to try to defeat Sin. And, like, the actual context of the story are very different. But but a lot of the visual imagery in this movie is just Godzilla under the water, and you see like the spines sticking out of the water, and it's like this like force of nature coming at you, and you're just filled with dread, and like there's this sad moment as he wreaks havoc on everything around him, and like the vibe that creates, I thought worked really well in this movie.
What?
And then there's this scene where the captain is like teaching the kid how to laugh because he doesn't know how to laugh. That's the scene.
Oh, in Final
Fantasy X.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Right.
Come on, man.
I was with you. It's just not a great scene.
It was a fake. It was
also not a very good joke. So I apologize.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the movie.
But yeah, no, Godzilla is a force of nature. I think it's really the best place for him to live.
Yeah.
I liked how he's like kind of stupid in this movie, and I like that. He's like he's just kind of a big animal, like a big monster, right? Yeah. And like they're able to like distract him and lure him out of the water. They're able to, he like just kind of follows their little boat, and then they drop the mine into his mouth and blow it up, and then like he's regenerating. They like use that scene to kind of like introduce his regeneration factor and like build on his power, and then he takes on the destroyer that shows up and all this stuff. Like really cool scene, and really cool how they continue to introduce his powers. But like he is very much just like not only a force of nature, but like tailored to be the conflict of the movie in order to play the role that he needs to play in the story of the main character, Koichi.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about, because I've been on social media too much, and people everybody thinks that they're the smartest person, and so they post these like weird, these takes about Batman, and if Batman it's his fault, he actually created the villains, or he could do better with the spending money on stuff, but like it's like superheroes are meant to be a metaphor for someone standing up to the bad people, and like they're not meant to be taken literally. And I really like how in this film they really emphasize that Godzilla is a metaphor. He's not like he's not this misunderstood whatever. There's not a humanity to him. And I'm not saying that those types of stories aren't also valid, but I do like in this sort of meta world of everyone having hot takes and everybody's trying to be Watchmen and everything, for the last 50 years or whatever, that that like you can just tell a story that is just the story. So I really appreciate.
So what do you think Godzilla is a metaphor for or of in this story?
I mean, he's always been nuclear power.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's.
I think there's. I would argue there's other things though that he's
specifically nuclear weapons.
I think he's a metaphor for he's a metaphor for like war and for PTSD. There's elements of. There's just something to like this and that like just kicking a guy while he's down. You know, Japan is just starting to build up. You know, the one area, I forget where the part of Tokyo, but she's like it's amazing how fast they're rebuilding. And then, you know, she goes to work on her first day and it's just gone. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like the force of nature, the war, the things that we can't control. Like he's whatever he needs to be, you know. Yeah. Like I don't necessarily think it's like a metaphor that's like one of those metaphors that's like it's exactly this, but it's got elements of a lot of things. It's just that like, yeah, that challenge that our lead character has to overcome.
I was a little surprised they tried to stay away from directly comparing him to the nuclear bombs as much. They didn't even really mention that they happened in the movies, other than maybe
like that one news clip.
Yeah, other than like a few shots where they just had a giant explosions, which do tend to look like nuclear bombs. That's just what giant explosions look like.
Yeah. Well, I think like his nuclear breath, his heat ray, or whatever you want to call it, in downtown Ginza, like that huge mushroom cloud was deliberately reminiscent of like.
Yeah, but they weren't like trying to have like them drop their own nukes or like try to use some sort of nuclear power. He wasn't like chasing a nuclear thing. He was just showing up and claiming territory. So I think that was kind of a nice change almost. But I mean, like you said, it's just kind of the same. They kept talking about how Japan kept self-sabotaging itself and was always kicking itself and tearing itself down as much as anything else was. So Godzilla was just another part of that as much as anything. Yeah. Did the deep sea fish look dumb to anyone else?
Yeah, a little creepy.
Yeah, like what? These don't look like anything. These look like someone made like a little bobber thing and they just let them go and they didn't really pay that much attention to them. And I think that was one of the major things that bothered me. Like just they felt like it cheaped out.
So this movie had a $19 million budget.
Okay, so small for
a
movie of that
pretty
size.
small.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually like kind of appreciated a handful of moments that made it look a little bit cheap. Not only because, and I mean, none of us have like a history with Godzilla, but we do know that like there were like some kind of cheapo fake looking stuff like, and I do think that lends itself to the overall feel of the movie, you know, even if it is reminiscent of like something from Power Rangers or something, because even if we haven't seen Godzilla, we've seen guys in suits fighting over buildings.
Yeah, so speaking of that, I really appreciate how Godzilla, like, standing up in this film, he's very much like a tall, upright figure, right? Which is very much like the classic Godzilla look, like harkening back to the guy in the suit days. Whereas, like, more other films, like especially American ones, have him more horizontal, like a dinosaur or a lizard or something like that. I like just embracing the classic Godzilla like posture and look.
Okay, so the cheap budget, that definitely makes me think of the naval scenes a little bit more differently, because it definitely felt like, at least when they were like, we have the Takao. This is the sole surviving heavy cruiser of the entire war. It is the heaviest thing the Japanese Navy ever had that wasn't called a battleship or a battle cruiser. So this is like the biggest ship that they've got. It's got not only its primary guns, which is the only thing it uses, that had no secondary guns. That thing was just festooned with all the guns you could possibly imagine. They didn't use any of them, so
It gets one broadside off on him.
right. And then it had one somewhat questionable thing. I think it was the only problem I really had with that battle, where the ship is turned 45 degrees and these giant guns that are held in completely by gravity, they're not attached. They're just sitting in those sockets. Was able to turn and fire on the move while it was sinking. I'm like, I don't think that would work physically. Much less the guys inside are like hanging on. Like, that was the only complaint I had with that. But the main thing was like the scenes where they've got the sailors. They've got 6 guys on clearly what is a green screen. There's nothing else around. They're not interacting with any of the scenery or anything like that. And they do the exact same thing for the destroyer fight later. Probably the same green screen set.
Sure.
And
Guys on deck reacting to environment.
yeah, and they could clearly tilt it, and that's the one thing they had, so they tilted it, and then they fell.
See, I really liked those.
I was like,
work.
I do like it now that you've told me it's $19 million, but at the time I was like, that's kind of weird.
So I will say, I didn't notice those being like looking. I didn't think those looked like green screens. I felt like that was like and I don't know anything about history, but I felt like that was maybe a nod to like the way that kind of would be. Like, you've got like a bunch of guys on a boat and they're all doing their little stuff, but like there's this freaking, like, people aren't looking at screens, you know. People are,
right.
If you want to see the thing, you have to look at the thing.
If there is a giant hulking lizard that is tearing your boat apart, you're shooting it with every gun you have. And I kind of associated that with they rebuilt it and they only had enough time to maybe set up those guns.
I thought they said it wasn't. I thought they said it wasn't armed.
They were decommissioning it,
okay.
and so basically, I assumed they just put enough ammo on there to fire a couple times, and that would have been about it. But yeah, basically, they were doing in the movie what they did in real life, which was they took it to Singapore and they were going to sink it. When it was captured, it actually didn't even have a full load of ammo and couldn't have fought even if it wanted to.
Yeah, so probably that's what it was.
Yeah,
it probably could. I don't know. I'm not a big enough nerd. I'm the jock of this podcast, as we established on the last episode.
Kendall's doing push-ups right before we walked in.
I was thinking more about your earlier question. What do you think Godzilla is a metaphor for? Mm-hmm. I think he's a metaphor for survivor's guilt.
Sure.
In this case. I think not only was the main character very explicitly dealing with survivor's guilt in that, you know, all these guys on the island died because he failed to fire the guns. Whether or not that actually would have stopped Godzilla, we don't know. But not only is he dealing with that, but I feel like Japan as a whole is dealing with, like, what, you know, the war is over. Those of us who survived, why did we survive, and what do we do now? And it's collectively, like, as they're propelled forward by the plot and by Godzilla's increasing attacks, they all have to come together to move past, like, we don't condone the way the government fought this war. We're not going to sacrifice ourselves to do this. We're going to band together. We're going to do things better, and we're going to survive, and we're going to live for the future.
And that's another one I think Godzilla is a metaphor for in this movie. I think he's a metaphor for the Japanese government as it existed back in 1945, and he's a metaphor for Japan moving on from what it was when World War II and pre-World War II.
So really, he's a metaphor for all of the challenges.
Yeah, sure. it's their attempt to redefine themselves, right? You have that scene when they're getting ready for the big operation at the end, and the captain is like, "I'm excited that we're in this game and we're actually going to be doing some good," right? Because the way modern day Japan works now is they're still kind of struggling with sort of reconciling what Japan did in the 1945s. Like, when you compare their response to World War II versus like Germany's, right? Germany like immediately admitted fault and they got rid of Nazi ideology right away, and like they apologized and they dealt with it. And that's kind of more of a point of controversy in Japan is do we acknowledge these things that Japan did, or do we ignore them? And it's a big controversial issue. And so I think the movie isn't going to come right out and be like, yeah, we were the bad guys in World War II. We did all this messed up stuff. But it's more like the citizens saying, we're going to push aside and redefine ourselves from what we were before. They stress that it's a civilian operation. It's not a government operation, right? We're not that anymore. We're something new.
They were volunteers.
Yeah, and so taking out Godzilla is, in a way, a rebirth for the Japanese society to move on to a much different ethos going forward.
Yeah, so originally, I mean, a lot of the Japanese culture immediately after the war was very anti-war and was very like, we're never going to do this again. Kamikaze pilots were shamed. Pretty much a lot of the military was like looked down upon and stuff like that. A lot of the culture where they've been pushing back against that, and a lot of the things like showing kamikaze pilots as heroes again, a lot of that has happened since the 80s, where the big conservative faction has pushed through. Shinzo Abe was kind of the prime minister at the time, and until very recently was pushing much more nationalistic views. Now, international politics aside, I'm not an expert. Please do not send us emails. I don't read the emails we get anyway.
We don't get emails.
We get emails?
Do we even have an email?
Send us angry emails, and Kendall will read them all to me.
This is one that I give you permission.
All right. Send us angry emails about my misread of Japanese politics.
Only if you know more about Japanese politics than this white guy and this Chinese guy.
Yeah. All right. So, but the other thing was, I think it was really interesting, that scene where they're all sitting in that room and they're like, and each person has to decide, is this worth it or not? And I found that really interesting with your comment about the survivor's guilt, because each person who decides to participate in the end has to make that decision is this important enough to me? And some of them are like, I have a family, and they decide that they have more to live for outside of this, and they leave, and they disassociate themselves from the survivor's guilt completely and move on with their lives. And I thought that was interesting.
I just always like scenes like that where somebody says like, who's with me, and like
everybody cheers.
Sometimes say yes, some people say yes, and some people say no. It's like the end of Dead Poets Society.
Far more realistic.
Like it's realistic, but it's also like, you know, that it makes you believe that the people who are staying are staying, like they don't feel pressured to stay. It's not just it's
genuine
not a group
response.
thing.
Beyond the giant monster coming to kill everyone they love. Yes.
I really appreciate like, after those who stay decide to stay, the captain, the ex-destroyer captain, just looks at them and then he thanks them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you don't get
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it was definitely a nice change for a leader.
Something
a little more grateful.
Yeah.
Something that I wanted to bring up, that you brought up, the 33 milliliter or 30 millimeter gun that can destroy everything in the world, according to the random mechanic.
That was a 20 millimeter cannon at the beginning of the
I thought it was 30.
The one on the
plane?
fight, the one
On
on
the
the
fighter
fighter
plane.
at the beginning,
Yeah.
is a 20 millimeter.
Yeah.
I think the 30 millimeter is on the Shinden at the end of the movie. Those are two different planes.
I think the first one had a 30 millimeter.
I remember being
The 20
as well,
millimeter
but it
was on the
doesn't matter.
boat.
I think it matters more than anything else we've yet
So
discussed.
the boat had a 13 millimeter.
13 millimeter.
You know, I'm saying
I
40
did my
millimeter,
research.
and I'm
That is-
calling it.
That is a French invented Hotchkiss guns, and every single navy in the world used those during World War II.
Okay,
Anyway.
no, you're probably right about that. But anyway, no, it had to have been.
It
It's a
doesn't
40
matter.
millimeter. It's 40 millimeter.
40
I'm sticking with
millimeter.
it. That's
Well,
the
whatever.
I
answer.
was gonna say, there's
I'll-
not a lot of aviation 30 millimeters,
Well,
so
fine.
the fact
Well-
that it was that big would have been very impressive.
I'll look it up.
It's a 60 millimeter. I'm sure of it.
I'll look it up before I edit.
I thought it was like 120.
100, maybe 130.
Anyway.
It's 130.
Anyway,
700 millimeters.
So you mentioned,
Figuratively.
like, would it have made a difference? Like, if he had shot Godzilla, then would it have made a difference? And I think that's like, you know, there's also the kamikaze element of he would not, if he specifically, like, regardless of everyone else, if he had, you know, exploded his plane, if he had gone through with his kamikaze mission, that would not have made a difference.
Right.
Like, that is,
The war would have ended anyway.
yeah, and honestly, almost certainly, I mean, I don't know how good the guns are versus the other guns, but, like, a bunch of people did shoot Godzilla and, like, nothing happened.
Right. So those
So
Arisaka rifles are not going to do jack.
Yeah.
But a 20 millimeter might. Now, the main thing is,
120 millimeter.
yes, the 120 millimeter aviation gun, which is probably no. So the gun that he had, I thought the most important thing was when you looked at the gun sight, he barely had a shot. The jaw just barely dipped into the gun sight.
Yeah, it may
he
not
didn't
have a
even
shot,
necessarily have a good shot. but he chose not to take a long shot. Now, maybe he did when it walked past, and he could have fired then, but he hesitated for a brief moment when it wasn't clear that it would have made a difference in that scene, which I think ties in well with your kamikaze scene.
But I think, and then also we find out later in the movie that he's basically impervious to conventional weapons. If you'd have shot Godzilla in the face, he would have healed. Probably.
He would have bought some time, and everyone
Which
would
is
have run.
again,
But yeah,
or he would have gotten himself killed, and it wouldn't have been enough.
Right.
The important thing about that scene, though, wasn't to establish whether firing would have saved the guys or not. It was to reinforce that this character, Koichi, the main character, was frozen by fear at multiple times through this film,
and blamed himself as a coward.
Right. He also definitely,
coward.
yes, even though he would not have made a difference, the choice that he made was based on fear.
Right.
Both him and Tachibana would have known at that point that they did everything they could, and it would have changed things for them.
For what we know, in his mind in the scene, he was not thinking, "Oh, if I fire at Godzilla, it won't matter." He probably was
They
thinking,
didn't know.
"Shooting him is probably our only chance." Right?
Yeah.
He was just too
It still
afraid.
It
to
just
do it.
froze. Yeah.
Which again was also like that was the reason why he was on the island in the first place, right? Is because he was supposed to be flying out to battle as a kamikaze pilot, and then he
Fake
like
the failure.
pretended there was something wrong
Yeah.
with his
Yeah.
plane and landed in the first place.
Which is a very historically accurate thing. A lot of kamikaze pilots did do that. They'd go up, there'd be a lot of things, and if you did it too many times, they just kill you.
but that's also just again a reflection of World War II itself, right? Where Japan relied on kamikaze tactics in naval warfare, and then when you look at the battle in the Pacific, right, kamikaze soldiers killing themselves didn't really have much of an effect on the war.
There was the kamikaze, there was the bonsai charge, both.
Right.
The kamikaze was potentially more effective than the bonsai charge, except once the U.S. knew it was coming.
But just like him shooting at Godzilla, all it would have accomplished is just Godzilla turning around and destroying the ship and him dying, right?
Right.
All kamikaze attacks accomplished in World War II was just killing pilots needlessly. That's why they have that line at the end where it's like, our government threw our lives away needlessly, and why he gets to jettison out of the plane at the end, right? Because they realize we can accomplish this without pointlessly killing our soldiers.
And I mean, just like from a broader... Again, I'm a history expert, but my understanding is that like by the time that Pacific Front in World War II, towards the end, for some reason it makes me think of the scene in Jojo Rabbit. Did you guys see Jojo Rabbit?
It did.
Yes.
That's a fantastic film.
The scene when the kid is like
So good.
the only ones that are left siding with the Germans are the Japanese, and between you and me, they don't look very Aryan. But the Germans got defeated, and then we kept fighting the Japanese for a little bit longer, but that was largely not that there was like a point to any war. Everything is, but that was like a particularly senseless time, because it was the U.S. the Allies were going to defeat Japan. It was pretty inevitable, but it was just and that's the justification for dropping the nukes and stuff, was that like.
Whether we're
Japan
gonna invade,
they were not gonna give up.
I mean, there is a historical argument on whether we needed to invade at all, or whether a naval blockade would have been better for the United States. It would have been absolutely brutal to the Japanese people and would have been essentially a genocide. But that doesn't really matter for the purposes of this.
There's a whole lot involved.
Now, there is
My point is, we were at a point at the point at the beginning of the movie. It was at a point where any more fighting, like the war was basically over. Like there was not nothing. He was not going to make it.
That's what the mechanic guy said, right? Like, why are you even choosing to go out there,
Right.
throwing
The
your
fact
life
that-
away for a win?
I really appreciated the fact that the mechanic said that rather than another kamikaze pilot, because it definitely gave him some cover. Although initially I kind of thought he was trying to like catch him out, like and trick him, because something like that to test his loyalty. But at the same time, like the fact that that someone who wasn't directly in his chain of command and wasn't responsible for making sure that he did this said that was, I think, a really nice touch to the film.
And so as the film goes on, we have his, obviously his neighbor who really like judges him for everything, but like I really like that once he gets on the wooden boat, and there are a few different moments where he's kind of confessing a little bit more details of the story and stuff. And really, his friends on the boat, who kind of represent everybody, like, they don't judge him.
Yeah.
I loved, because like, I love the dynamic of him and the woman and the child.
Noriko and Akiko.
Yeah, Noriko and Akiko. In the fact that they kind of came together out of necessity, and they did fall in love, but it was like, but also they sort of had a platonic relation, like.
Right. He didn't feel that he was worthy.
He was, but not even like from the like romantic side, but just like they kind of came together because these were people who were in an impossible situation and just wanted to live and just came together and overcame all this stuff together. Mm-hmm. And then when they're having dinner in sake, and they say, "Oh, she's not my wife," and he kind of explains, and the captain is like, "Oh, that is a beautiful story." Like, you kind of think, because of our presuppositions about Japanese culture and stuff, that they're going to judge, he's living with a woman who's not his wife, but it's not that. It's you guys have come together as a family, overcoming that,
Right. I really did appreciate how obvious it was that pretty much every character in the film had been through what was basically an unimaginable horror, whether it was civilian or military, no matter what they'd been through. Like, the war sucked for everyone involved.
Yeah, the movie's all about Japan healing from its trauma, right?
It wasn't like there was anyone who was still like, hey, we could have done it.
Yeah. The South will rise again. That was not a sentiment.
No. Incidentally, that conversation you were referring to is what led her to go and get that job in Ginza, which put her in the path of Godzilla when he came through on his rampage. By the way, that rampage, that was such a good rampage.
It was really well done.
Great rampage.
Especially with like the newscasters on the roof of the building.
Yeah, newscasters on the roof.
Just for some reason not running away.
Yeah,
Like,
what
we're doing is not safe. And we're dead.
Well, it's like what else are you gonna like? Because I feel like it's like they were okay, well, we're here from a safe vantage point, and I'm gonna report, and then he starts walking towards them, and they're like, we're dead now.
Yeah,
there's nothing we can do.
We're gonna die in the stairwell.
Even if they had fled, what were their odds anyway?
And man, the music, so throughout the film, but his rampage, and then of course at the very, very end when he starts regenerating, it goes into the credits. The music is so good.
It's so good, and it doesn't overpower the scene either, right? Like, it sets the tone perfectly without like overstaying its welcome.
Right. It gives them a victory, but you're not sure for how long, kind of a thing. Like, maybe Godzilla will forget all this stuff because he doesn't have a brain anymore, but who knows?
The Godzilla theme.
Yeah, so there was
fantastic.
That was pretty good. Now, the only thing I want to talk about, the two things I think that kind of brought me out of it, I think historically inaccurate wise, was the first time they mentioned, they didn't give us ejection seats for our fighters and stuff. Like, those didn't exist yet. They had technically been invented in 1940, but the rocket propelled ejection seats weren't actually on a plane until like 1967. So like, this is 1947. Like, nobody really knew about those yet. There was not an option. You had to physically pull the canopy back and jump.
Well, to be fair, Godzilla doesn't exist either. Whatever difference in technology caused Godzilla to exist also made it so that they invented it.
Right. So during the scene where they're complaining about not getting ejection seats, I was kind of mad, and then at the final scene when he parachutes out, I'm like, okay, that's fine, I guess.
It's the same scene that happened in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it lets us save the hero.
Yeah, it set it up.
It's fine.
It set it up so that it could redeem it.
Yeah. Right. Nobody cares. It's fine. The other thing that bothered me was them saying like, MacArthur won't is saying that he's worried about the Russians and we're on our own. I'm like, one, MacArthur doesn't actively wants to fight the Russians. Like,
right. They were coaxing.
But at the same time, he really hates the Japanese, so I feel like it's in character for him to totally let this giant monster just destroy their cities as a
it's not,
plague
though.
from God upon them.
Historically, so here's my thing. I know we kind of said this isn't relevant, but I think it is. Like, I argue that the reason the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Japan is because they wanted to coax Japan into surrender before the Soviets invaded and declared war. Well, they declared war, but they wanted Japan to surrender before the Soviets can take a piece of Japan. So the U.S. wanted Japan all to themselves as an ally, and MacArthur wanted to protect their investment, right? So they poured a lot of money into the Japanese economy afterward in order to protect that investment and keep it as non-Sovietized as possible.
That's a fair point. But at the same time, MacArthur was removed for being so war crazy that he wanted to preemptively nuke the Soviet Union.
Oh, 100%. Which is why he wanted to keep Japan as a firm ally so that he could fight the Soviets.
I could see it either way, but I thought those 2 points were kind of interesting.
So I will say, I don't know anything about any of that stuff, but I will say that it is. I mean, and this is freaking. I apologize. This is like a million people have said this on Twitter, or Threads. I'm not on Twitter anymore. Threads.
Well,
really
I don't read
boring,
Threads,
though.
so please tell me what Threads is saying.
Threads is like if you just saw other people's friends' Facebook statuses. It's the worst. like
I've never even heard of this website, but I love it already.
It's Threads is
Facebook,
Facebook's
Twitter.
It's Facebook's answer to Twitter, which it's okay. Anyway, and also they're don't comment on somebody's question, or else your entire feed will be that exact same question for the next 2 weeks.
Other people commenting your question over it.
No, it's not even that. It's not even that. It's other people asking, "What movies do I have to watch before I see
because
Wolverine
it's the most
and Deadpool?"
similar thing.
Because it sees that I engaged with that. So obviously, I want to answer that question 100 more times.
Okay, so tell us what Threads says.
But a lot of people pointed out that it is kind of ridiculous that it took a Godzilla movie for us to get from the perspective of the Japanese, like, period piece that really, analyzes their role post World War II. Because we get every year we get another movie about white people fighting World War II.
Sure.
And we just don't.
I mean, there are movies about the Japanese fighting World War II. Specifically, Tora 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 is probably one of the better ones.
I mean, you want another movie about, like, from the perspective of Japanese dealing with on the civilian front, dealing with, like, the end of World War II?
Right.
Grave of the
Fireflies.
Yeah, I mean,
Fireflies.
we were
right there.
we all knew where we were going.
So there's an anime. So there's an anime. I mean, no, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but that's. I mean,
there's a lot less of them.
But yeah, there's
for every movie like this, there's 8 Hacksaw Ridges.
I don't feel like
I like Hacksaw Ridge for what it was. It's not about the Japanese, and that's okay.
No, it's not okay because I've heard the white people story a bunch of times.
Then don't watch the movie. It's fine.
I
It's a good
didn't
movie.
want to. You made me.
And I would do it again too.
But the thing. So it just I mean that's the thing. Like it took. The fact, I mean, this is a Godzilla movie, and you're like, whether or not McCarthy or MacArthur, are those the same person?
MacArthur, yeah.
McCarthyism is like
a very similar time period politician who was anti-communist.
Yeah, McCarthy was scared.
Same person. Anyway, moving on.
McCarthy. Anyway,
Communism is bad.
Anyway, like the fact that you guys are going into that much detail on the that you even can come close to that on the historical accuracy or whatever of this Godzilla movie, speaks to how little these themes have been explored in modern, especially in modern cinema. 100%. Because even like when was Grave of the Fireflies from?
90s, mid-90s. Early 90s, maybe?
Letters to Iwo Jima, I think, is also, like, in the same thing. And it's from,
I forgot about that movie.
However long ago. It's, but also, I would imagine, probably is problematic because Clint Eastwood was involved with it. So.
Grave of the Fireflies, 1988.
Yeah, okay, 88, yeah, so.
Now, another thing that I kind of wanted to point out was I thought it was really interesting that it wasn't just even necessarily just the Japanese sailors that were like war-torn survivors. It was the ships themselves, because the Takao was the last surviving member of the Takao class. Every other ship in that class that was named after it died. The destroyers are all very famous examples. I think it was I did a lot of research and then left all my notes at home, so please forgive me if I get a couple of these wrong. But the
direct
Hibiki,
all of your
the
emails to Nick
Tsukikaze,
Jew.
the Keiyaku, and the Tsuyu are all like really good examples, and all different classes, I believe.
Okay.
Of
So
the
clearly
ships.
they did their research.
Yeah, they
too,
did
and
the research. All of them historically survived. I checked each of them.
Okay. So
And
they thoughtfully picked the ships that were.
and I mean that makes sense, because if anyone's going to pick the most famous Japanese warships that survived, it's going to be a Godzilla movie, a Japanese movie about the period, rather than like Americans picking a random ship name or something, making up one.
And now Godzilla can wreck 3 of them.
Yeah.
Well, and I also like sort of like along those lines, I liked how they had a bunch of, it was very believable that they had a bunch of like decoy, decommissioned battle or
Destroyers,
ships that are just kind of floating there for him to destroy.
Well, they had 4 of them, right? He during the briefing he said they had 4.
Well, he had 4.
They
and
left
then
2 of them.
There were
other ones
also
before that.
additional ones that were like decoys.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Like,
The one that
there's
they threw
there's
against.
Yeah, there's at least the one of them that he destroys like right when he shows up. at the
That's
beginning.
that's like a research vessel or something that's supposed to be tracking him. It looked like a freighter, to be honest, based on the paint scheme, and the half of it I saw for a very brief second. It looked more like some sort of supply ship or
I
something.
thought they said it was a decoy.
I mean, it could be a decoy, but I mean, it looked more. It had a bunch of cranes and stuff on it. Was the main point. But I also thought it was really interesting. Not only was it the ships, but the J7W Shinden, the plane itself, is the lone survivor. They only built 2 of them. The U.S. Air Force Intelligence took one of them because they wanted to know what the hell they'd been building. And then the only other one, historically, was scrapped for parts. And here it was actually just the one that was sitting in a warehouse. And it's the last surviving plane of its type.
Really cool, distinctive, with the tail wing and the rear prop.
Yeah.
Pretty cool plane. I'm glad they picked it to like say,
And then
hey, here's this weird.
Very
And then we'll
uniquely
reveal
Japan.
that the other one actually does still exist in Godzilla Plus 2.
Yeah. The Americans are going to provide spare parts after they crash the first one in a terrible accident. Yeah, I don't know what the armament was. I don't know whether that one actually had 30 millimeters or not. I wasn't paying that much attention at that point.
So something that I just caught on second viewing, that because this is called Godzilla -1 because it takes place before the original Godzilla movie.
Right.
All of the stuff that happened, the government covered it up in this movie. Like they did not know that the destroy where all the buildings got destroyed. That
Ginza?
thing, the Ginza, what like they thought that was an airstrike from the Americans, or something. Like they thought it was. They did not know that was Godzilla. And then all the other times you see Godzilla, he's out out at sea, and also the island they blamed on the Americans. Like they go out of their way to say we didn't know. The government kind of goes out of the way to cover it up. And so then technically this could take place in continuity with the original Godzilla movie.
I found it really interesting that the Americans actually lose a ship and have no response. They do not care at all. Because that first ship that they find, Savage, was an American ship, which
We're just dealing with the
feels
Soviets.
odd that the U.S. wouldn't respond in any way to that.
Just dealing with the Soviets, man.
I mean, maybe they are. We're just not seeing that
That's true.
perspective.
That could be minus.
You know what? You're right,
minus
Kendall.
one.
I just don't feel like the American perspective has been shown enough in World War II movies.
What we need is more of these films from
That's
the
right.
American perspective.
Well, we
Barely
are
any of
getting
them.
more of them from the American perspective. You were just talking about him, and he's fighting King Kong.
Which is a movie I have no interest in watching, by the way.
The other thing I really, really, really like about, and this is apparently true of a lot of Japanese Godzilla movies, is if you're in Japan in one of these movies, even if you've never heard of Godzilla, and somebody is like a giant lizard attacked me, you're like, I agree. Godzilla does exist. Like nobody quite like the I think the captain like at one point kind of questions him, but overall like there is not a plot line of
Yeah.
no, you have to believe me kind of stuff.
Well, he also
a
doesn't
dinosaur-like creature came out of the sea and attacked us.
Yeah, he also doesn't really bring it up until something really weird is happening.
Well, he's also incredibly suspicious of the government, right?
Right.
And that's for a reason, right? Most of the almost that's all of the characters are, right? The government plays a very small role in the movie, if at all, and when it does, it's lying or making 4 people risk their lives on an incredibly dangerous mission that is way above their pay grade, right?
I did like the part where they're like, we're gonna send out this reverse mine layer to slow them down long enough to send a ship from Singapore. You're gonna slow it down for about 5 minutes.
They're wasting their lives,
but
right?
Takau's totally gonna make that count.
Yeah, it's the same thing that the Japanese government had been doing in World War II, right? That's their mentality, which is why the heroes had to be a civilian group who addressed the problem from a different perspective. Right. We're going to value people's lives and treat them importantly.
I assume that civilian group that they form is actually like really important in the later Godzilla movies. I have no idea. Is that the same group that is in the other ones?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't seen them.
It felt like a reference, but I don't know.
I don't remember if they referenced them in Shin Godzilla.
Yeah, they gave an acronym. I didn't remember it.
Yeah.
Let's see if I wrote it down. Probably not.
I didn't remember them having an acronym.
Yeah.
They only mentioned it like one time. The Doc Noda mentions that they're forming a civilian group when he gives them the invite. Right. I think that's the only time they mention it.
Yeah, I didn't write it down.
Let's see. What other things do I have? Oh, the Cheeto tanks were cool. They did nothing, which makes sense because Cheeto tanks were kind of terrible, but...
Yeah, but people thought they did something for a second.
I mean,
did we get him? We didn't get him.
It was cool. I don't know. Japanese tanks are not well regarded.
I really liked that there was no. I mean, maybe they fudged some science that I was not smart enough on, or maybe they fudged some history. But there were no, other than Godzilla, there were really no sci-fi elements.
Right.
Yeah.
Godzilla didn't release a weird swarm of bugs doing his bidding or something.
Well,
crazy thing.
It wasn't it wasn't like somebody had actually created Tesla had created a supercomputer. Tesla, the guy, not Elon Musk's company.
Yes.
And that's kind of going back to they're not explaining Godzilla. They didn't feel a need to give Godzilla an origin story,
which was smart.
Like
yeah.
They didn't feel we didn't cause Godzilla. Godzilla has always been.
No, they did acknowledge that the nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll was what
kind of
powered
pissed
him
off. Yeah.
But it was smart to not do that because they already
had. Always been a big lizard.
Yeah. They already had that big long exposition scene when the Doc had to go through his plan for how they're gonna kill Godzilla, and that was like, oh, as you can see on the board here, and he's pointing to it, and it's like that's all the exposition you want in the movie. You don't want a big other one where here's how Godzilla came to be. It's too much.
I just want to throw out my fact. This is my freaking the fact that everyone on the internet knows, but I'm obsessed with. Bikini Bottoms is a reference to Bikini Atoll. Right. Mm-hmm. So SpongeBob also was created by the same stuff that he has the same origin as Godzilla.
There we go. Fascinating. The more you know.
Can he use the atomic breath?
Maybe he can. We just haven't seen it yet.
He can absorb water and then spit it out.
That's not the same thing.
Right.
He can light fires underwater.
I mean, it was blue. It's blue energy. Just
maybe
really
you can
pressurized water.
Maybe you can argue that SpongeBob will eventually become Godzilla when his transformation is complete. He's the very, very early stages of Godzilla.
Sure.
I don't think Godzilla is in Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl. You can fight the Ninja Turtles, which is kind of the same.
I did kind of like so with $19 million, they definitely chose where to spend their special effects budget, and I think that was a really good choice.
Zilla himself looked really good.
Yeah,
yes,
I thought the
100%.
explosion in Ginza where she gets killed, assumedly, because let's be honest, the only reason she's alive at the end of the movie is the same reason that they had an ejection seat. Because it feels good.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I remembered from first viewing. So watching the second one, she gets killed allegedly.
Yeah.
I'm like,
there's no way.
But actually, it kind of. For some reason, I remember her surviving at the end of the movie last time, but that feels kind of cheap.
Yeah.
See, I
did she really survive
entirely? Because I was watching when I watched it the first time. I'm literally watching this movie. I am engaged with every emotional beat. The little kid crying made me cry both times.
It was
like
great.
everything. and then they kill her, and I'm like, that is the one problem that I have with this movie is that they have essentially fridged Noriko, and it really like kind of buzzed in the back of my head, and then I was like, and then also they're setting up for him to freaking overcome everything by killing himself, and that's gonna be that's kind of counter to the entire rest of the movie. So but I mean, I guess it's okay, and most people are only happy like when all the characters die. Anytime a character survives in a movie, people complain. So I assumed that since it was getting lots of good reviews that everybody died, and it was actually about how everything was horrible. But then as you get closer, and the captain is like, seriously, you got a kid, you can't, like they acknowledge like, no, you should, and it's like, So I'm curious. On first viewing, did you guys think he was going to kill himself, or did you think he was going to survive?
I 100% thought he was going to kill himself.
I thought he was going to kill himself at first, but then as the movie progressed and you got to the scene where he reminds him, do not throw your life away.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to survive.
I mean, you were clearly meant to think that he was going to, right? Yeah. That's the reason that they hid the scene of the ejector seat explanation until after he ejected.
Right.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure it would have been a worse movie if he had gone through with it, and that's how it had ended.
Now
it would have
changed the tone.
It would have thematically undermined the entire movie.
I mean, that's a good point.
I'm not sure it would have been. I'm not sure it would have been a worse movie if Noriko had not survived.
I expected to happen.
I don't think she needed to. I think it reinforces the point of the movie that she did, that he now has like something to live for. Yeah. But I don't think
if you want to keep her dead, then you gotta add a scene at the end where he like comes home and gives Akiko a big hug, and they walk together into the sunset.
It could be about Akiko.
I was actually, I think, much happier with the idea that seeing the older lady's face when she realized that the message was, because I was pretty sure that's what it was. But I think I would have been happier if Noriko had survived and he had not, because he chose to do that. I think that would have been more of you don't give up, because there is always the thing. Like, he failed the ideal, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's over, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna disagree with you, because it's like the point.
That's fine.
No, it's not. We gotta fight.
You know what? I can't. It just feels a little too happy ending. But I mean, I do get it is very on theme that they both survive.
Right.
I just don't know if I like it, because
the point is
a little Deus Ex Machina.
Because Japan
on both
is like
accounts.
You can't, because the Japanese government was like, we're gonna sacrifice the lives of our citizenry to achieve the greater goal of societal happiness, right? That was the whole purpose of having kamikaze soldiers in the first place. That's why they sent civilians to fight in Okinawa, right? Like that was the whole thing, undermining the Japanese government. So this whole point of the movie is to move beyond that way of thinking, and that's why everyone was so adamant that's like, no, you cannot kill yourself to defeat this menace. You have to live, because we need to do things a different way now and show the world that we can achieve our goals through life rather than death.
Now, it is critically important that he didn't find out that she was alive until after he had decided to live. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think that's 100% true. I'm just annoyed that they invented an ejection seat and then clearly let her survive something that should have hasted her. But so like it's
not necessarily. Not necessarily. She got blown over. Like, she was just like knocked over by like some wind.
He probably just saw her lying there, and he's like, I don't know who that is. I'm going home.
The Noriko surviving is much more believable. Yeah, but
I feel like because the thing is, it's not just that she survived. It's if this was modern day, it's very much like, because of the time. If this was modern day, she would have survived, and like they would have like checked her wallet for her ID and then called him on his cell phone. Yeah. But in this case, probably she doesn't have, like, maybe she doesn't have any ID on her. She gets they find her 3 days later covered in rumble, and she's unconscious for an extended period of time.
Yeah, it couldn't reasonably have taken that long.
Like, they literally didn't know how to contact her.
And she probably couldn't go anywhere because she was too injured, right? She was bedridden.
Yeah, she didn't have an emergency contact. I think that's.
I mean,
that's
yes,
like,
it is possible that she would. I mean, it was kind of an allegory to the nuclear explosions, and people survived that in all kinds of weird, unpredictable ways. So it's not impossible, and that's why I don't have. As much problem with
it's
her
also
surviving.
a goddamn metaphor for whoever said it was a metaphor for survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Like, he cannot be with her until he gets over his survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And if Godzilla is his survivor's guilt, then he has to defeat Godzilla.
Yeah.
He has to defeat his own demons.
Right.
Yep. He has to end the war.
You know.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you want a happy ending, he has to defeat his
Not,
own
it's
demons.
not
If
even
you
that
don't,
it's a,
then
it's not
then
even that
it's
it's
a
a
tragedy.
happy.
Yeah.
It's not even that it's a happy ending. It is not about survivor's guilt if he dies. I think.
Yeah.
And
it's not about the collectively healing from
I
Japan's
think I
old
disagree
reputation.
about it not being survivor's guilt if he dies, because I think there is an element of, and something to remember is that not everyone with survivor's guilt makes it out.
Well, yeah. I think they would have to do things differently for it to be, but like the exact film as it is, I think it
Right.
undermines the message.
I think you're right. It just felt a little contrived to me, is all.
I think, yeah. It
That's
would
fair.
be it would just be it would have
Just
to
from
be
an emotional level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, no, I think
That's
I
okay.
think, I mean, I would not have suggested the movie if he died. I think I would have been like, it was okay except for the ending was bad. Like, and also, so here's another thing. People a lot of times talk about stakes in movies and how you can only have stakes if you have main character death. And this movie, like, I cared so much about everything, and I was so bought into everything. And yeah, totally, the not killing him at the end was the right call, and bringing Noriko back did not take away from her. It doesn't take away from her sacrifice.
Yeah.
Because she didn't, because her actions, it doesn't take away from his choice to live even if things are not perfect. And it's just like, the thing about suicide is that it's forever. And it's like, if he had not, if he had killed himself there, then yeah, like, it just would have, man, it would have been, there are movies where it's like the guy, Romeo and Juliet,
Yeah.
like the guy, he kills himself because he thinks that she's dead, but then she's really alive, or vice versa. She thinks he's dead, or
One of those.
Yeah,
They both
He
kill
thinks
each-
she's dead because she took the poison,
Right,
and then
right.
she wakes up and he's dead.
and then she kills herself.
Yeah.
but like that,
Everyone's dead.
I mean, that's like, it's like the oldest story ever.
Whoopsie.
So there's definitely a story to be told of, like, I killed myself, and if I had not killed myself, then everything would have been fine. And there's definitely a merit to that. You could even have it be, you're right, because depression is horrible and everything, but I like it better if it's
That's fair.
if it's something that can be overcome.
I
Because
agree with you.
He overcame it. It doesn't
Right.
feel contrived.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about him surviving. I don't know if Noriko necessarily needed to survive.
I feel the opposite, and that's okay.
Everyone's reactions are valid.
So I think if she doesn't survive, then I still have that buzzing in the back of my head that she was just killed off to motivate his character. And I don't like that.
You're very sensitive to fridging.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is rather cold.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, and well, not just like fridging, but other, like, when you have characters, when you kind of waste characters.
Really, she should have, like, jumped into a lead-lined fridge to survive.
That's real fridging right there. But Kendall, I
They
see
would buy in that case.
I see what you mean, because like fridging and other like surfacey level tropes like that take a potentially deep and interesting character and just turn them into a plot device. So yeah, it feels like a waste, right? And it just feels kind of lazy, where you're taking an interesting opportunity to develop character and you're just kind of throwing someone to the wolves to do it, right? It's like, no, there are better ways.
Yeah. Okay. So we are 2,077 measures into this recording.
Okay.
I don't know what that means as far as time, but I think I got most of what I wanted to say out.
too.
I mean, just watch this movie and you don't have to analyze it as much as we did. Just like it made me feel things.
Okay,
So
it made me
first
feel
off,
things.
he's wrong because what you need to do is find out whether it was a 20 millimeter or 30 millimeter, and then let us
Homework
know what the
assignment.
answer was.
I'm pretty
But
sure
yes,
it's 20.
go feel things, watch the movie. It was great.
I loved it too, just because I feel like it worked on so many interesting levels, right? Koichi's story was great. Godzilla was a really fun inclusion in the movie, and then I think it said a lot about Japanese culture and post-war commentary. So it works on all those levels, and those are my favorite kind of movies. So
Yeah. Go Godzilla.
All right, who's up next?
Well, you picked the last one, so this time it's mine. And you know what? We haven't done in a while. More westerns.
Nice.
So
we've never done an Eastern.
we're going to do a western that I've never actually seen, but have seen a lot of. So we're going to do the 1993 movie Tombstone.
Okay.
Tombstone.
Starring Kurt Russell's mustache.
I'll be your Huckleberry.
People say I'll be your Huckleberry to me sometimes. So that'll be good to be able to understand the reference. But the question is, will it be a reference that makes sense, or is it something that's been memeified so much that it doesn't even resolve
A little
that?
bit more than memeified, yeah.
We will find out how much I'll Be Your Huckleberry has been memeified next time on the KendallCast Movie Roundtable.
Tombstone is fine. It's fine.
This podcast is a production of the KendallCast Podcast Network. You can support the show for just $2 a month at patreon.com/KendallCast or make a direct donation through the PayPal link at kendallcast.ninja. Every little bit helps.